if a teenager in your life is, suddenly sleeping all day, snapping at you over little things, and taking these weirdly reckless risks, your first thought is probably, well, you probably just think, oh, typical teenager. It's just a phase.
Right, right. Just hormones.
Exactly. But brushing those signs off is, it's kind of like ignoring a blaring fire alarm in your house because you just assume it's a drill.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And today, we're doing a deep dive into the incredibly high stakes, often really murky world of youth mental health. We are pulling from an immense stack of sources today.
We really are.
Yeah, detailing both a critical life-saving guide on youth suicide prevention and this highly specialized K-12 mental health support system that is operating right now in Georgia. It's called MentalSpace School.
And, it is a heavy topic. There's really no getting around that. But the overarching theme we are unpacking today is not despair. It's actually hope. It is about concrete, measurable action. We're moving past the alarming statistics to equip you with a real understanding of the mechanisms behind crisis intervention and also the broad systemic solutions that are actively being deployed right now to catch these kids before they fall.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can look at those massive structural solutions for schools, we have to start at the kitchen table, right?
Absolutely. The micro level.
Right, the individual level. When you look at the behavioral data in our sources, a youth in crisis presents with some very specific, really grounded warning signs.
They do.
Like a primary red flag is a teenager talking about wanting to die or feeling like a burden or expressing a belief that others would simply be better off without them.
And we really have to look at why that happens, because the psychology of deep depression, it often turns completely inward. It creates this deeply distorted lens where the young person genuinely believes their absence would be a relief to their family.
Wow.
Right? That is not teenage angst. That is a brain inactive crisis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's fascinating here is that it goes way beyond what they are saying out loud. We also see them pulling away from their core friend groups, maybe giving away prized possessions.
Oh, they love.
Exactly. And showing significant noticeable changes in mood or sleep patterns.
I can easily see how, a stressed out parent or a really busy teacher could just miss those secondary signs.
So easily.
If a kid is sleeping 14 hours a day or taking wild risks, it's so tempting to brush it off as puberty or just teenage rebellion.
Yeah.
But it brings us back to that fire alarm. Or think of it like looking at the dashboard of a car.
Okay, I like
A
that.
check engine light comes on. It could mean something as minor as a loose gas cap, or it could mean catastrophic engine failure. But because you don't know for sure, you literally cannot just ignore the light.
You can't. And the source text demands that we don't leave room for the loose gas cap assumption when a life is on the line.
Right.
If a teen is showing these signs, we have to take it seriously every single time.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. And that requires removing our own convenience or, frankly, our own desperate desire for it to just be a passing phase. Entirely from the equation, we have to confront the uncomfortable reality.
Which naturally leads to the most daunting part of this whole process. You're looking at the dashboard, you spot the warning signs in a teenager in your life. What is the very next step?
Right.
This leads directly to a crucial piece of guidance in the text
Yeah.
that completely flipped my understanding of crisis communication.
It is the pivot point of the whole intervention process. The sources are so clear on this. Calmly and directly asking a young person whether they are thinking about suicide does not put the idea in their head.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
I have to admit, my instinct is to push back hard on that
A lot of people feel that way.
because it feels so profoundly counterintuitive. We have this deep-seated assumption that speaking the word suicide into existence makes it real.
Right, the Voldemort effect.
Exactly. It feels like if you don't mention the scary monster, the kid won't get scared. Does confronting it head-on really bring relief? How does that not plant the seed?
Because the seed is usually already there, and it's growing in the dark.
Wow.
Yeah. Asking directly is like acting as a pressure valve. Think about the psychology of a teenager in that state. They are terrified of their own thoughts.
Right.
They are carrying this massive, heavy secret, and they are completely isolated by it. So when an adult looks them in the eye and calmly asks the question, it shows the teenager that the adult is not terrified of the topic.
That makes a lot of sense.
It signals, I see your pain, it doesn't scare me, and we can handle this together.
It releases the pressure because they suddenly realize The thought isn't unspeakable.
Exactly. It immediately shatters the taboo. The relief that washes over a young person when they are finally asked that direct question is profound.
I can imagine.
It removes the isolation. You aren't introducing the concept of suicide, you know?
Right.
You are introducing the concept of help.
That makes so much sense when you frame it as a pressure valve. But obviously, opening that valve is just the first step.
Right, the very first.
Once that door is open, we move from the conversation to the actual logistical framework of keeping them safe. And the sources break the protocols down into very distinct phases. First is immediate danger. If there is an active crisis, there is no gray area. You call or text 988, which is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or you call 911 immediately.
That is the acute response. But we also have to look at what happens the next day and the next week.
The long game.
Right. How do you build sustainable safety? That brings in the concept of safety planning, which is a highly structured process led by licensed clinicians.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because people often assume mental health treatment is just sitting on a couch talking about your feelings for years.
Right, the old movie stereotype.
Yeah, but the safety planning in our sources is incredibly methodical. It is practical. It treats a mental health crisis with the exact same logistical preparation as a fire drill.
It is entirely concrete. A clinician sits down with the young person, and they specifically name their triggers.
Like writing them out.
Yes, they identify the exact situations, times of day, or feelings that precipitate a crisis. Then, they establish actionable coping steps. They write down a physical list of trusted people to contact when those triggers hit.
And it even goes into engineering the physical environment, right?
Absolutely.
The text calls for making the home safer by securing medications, locking up firearms, and removing other lethal means. And I was thinking, if you had to write a safety plan for your own home today, would you even know where those triggers or hazards are?
Most people wouldn't.
Right. The goal is to engineer a safer environment so that if a moment of crisis hits, the friction to do harm is as high as possible, and the friction to get help is as low as possible.
That friction is the difference between an intrusive thought and a tragic action.
Wow.
And this safety planning is supported by long-term, evidence-based therapies. Two of the most critical frameworks explicitly named in the text are cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT.
Okay, we hear those acronyms thrown around all the time.
Yeah.
But let's break down what they actually do for a kid in crisis.
Sure. So cognitive behavioral therapy is essentially about rewriting the code of your thoughts.
Okay.
A teen in crisis often has these automatic negative thoughts like, I am worthless, or nothing will ever get better. CBT teaches them to catch that thought, challenge it, and restructure it before it spirals into an action.
So it's catching the spiral.
Exactly. It's cognitive restructuring.
And DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, what's the difference there?
So DBT was originally developed specifically for suicidal individuals. It focuses heavily on distress tolerance.
Distress tolerance.
Right. Instead of just trying to change the thought, DBT teaches a person how to ride the wave of an intense, painful emotion without making the situation worse.
Oh, that's powerful.
It teaches emotional regulation and interpersonal effectiveness. It really is a toolkit for surviving the most painful moments of the human experience.
So we have this incredibly powerful individual framework. We know the warning signs. We know to ask directly to release the pressure. And we have these robust therapeutic tools like CBT and DBT.
Right.
But a parent cannot be awake 24 hours a day.
It cannot.
And they certainly can't follow their kid into the cafeteria or to math class.
Yeah.
That localized safety plan breaks down the minute the kid gets on the school bus, doesn't it? Unless the school itself is part of the treatment.
And that is the crucial transition from the micro to the macro.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, how do you scale this care so no child falls through the cracks? We look at MentalSpace School, which is a comprehensive K-12 mental health support system designed specifically for Georgia schools.
Yeah.
It is built to catch the kids the moment they step off that bus.
The logistics of how they operate are incredibly targeted, too. They offer same-day teletherapy.
Which is huge.
Think about how vital that is. If a student reaches a crisis point during third period, telling them they have an intake appointment in 3 weeks is completely useless.
Completely.
Same-day access is a massive disruption to the usual waiting game. And they deploy dedicated therapist teams per school. And they handle everything from crisis intervention to violence prevention.
And those therapists are licensed, diverse, and culturally competent.
Why is that specifically important here?
Because a major barrier to therapeutic success is a lack of connection. A student needs to sit across from someone who fundamentally understands their background and their lived experience.
To build trust.
Exactly. You need that trust for therapies like DBT to actually work.
They also have to operate within a maze of legal and regulatory frameworks. The text mentions they are HIPAA and FERPA compliant, which protects student medical and educational privacy.
Hmm.
But a really compelling detail is that MentalSpace provides support for schools to achieve HB 268 compliance, with a looming deadline of July 2026.
Right, and Georgia's House Bill 268 isn't just administrative red tape.
No.
No, it is a state mandate requiring schools to have robust, comprehensive mental health and suicide prevention policies actively in place.
Oh, I see.
Because schools are not historically equipped to be mental health clinics, right? They are equipped to teach algebra.
Right.
So
Exactly.
a system like MentalSpace integrates directly into the school to fulfill that life-saving legal mandate.
Now, looking at their service list in the source text, I noticed they devote resources to staff wellness and family counseling right alongside their K-12 student support.
Yes.
And I had a question about that. If school funding is notoriously tight, why divert resources away from the kids to provide therapy for the adults? Why not put 100% of the money toward the students in crisis?
Because a child does not exist in a vacuum.
Oh.
They are part of a delicate ecosystem. Imagine treating a student with intensive cognitive behavioral therapy. They are doing the work. They are learning distress tolerance. But at 3 o'clock, they return to a family system that is completely overwhelmed by poverty or their own trauma.
Oh.
Or they spend 7 hours a day in a classroom where the teacher is entirely burned out and dysregulated.
It's like you can't fix the fish if you don't clean the water.
I love that. Exactly. The student's recovery would be built on totally fragile ground. By supporting the whole ecosystem, providing counseling for the families and wellness support for the teachers, you create a resilient, regulated environment that can actually sustain the student's healing long term.
That structural approach makes perfect sense. But that brings us to the ultimate hurdle of healthcare, right?
Cost.
Right. It is phenomenal to have this systemic, ecosystem-wide program available in schools. But it only works if families can actually access it. The financial walls surrounding mental health care usually keep the kids who need it most locked completely out.
The barrier to entry is notoriously high in traditional private practice. But MentalSpace tackles this by essentially blanketing the insurance market. They are actively dismantling those financial walls.
The strategy is brilliant. They start by accepting Medicaid at $0. That alone opens the door for a massive population of vulnerable students. But they don't stop there. The text explicitly lists almost every major commercial provider. They take BCBS, Cigna, Aetna, UHC, Humana, Peach State, CareSource, and AmeriGroup.
They really cover the bases.
They really do. People can even reach out at mentalspaceschool.com or mentalspaceschool@cheattherapy.com. They have engineered their billing so that cost is literally no longer the friction point preventing a kid from getting a same-day appointment.
And we can see the impact of removing those barriers when we look at the outcomes.
The numbers are wild.
They are. The data they track proves the efficacy of this ecosystem approach. They report an 85% rate of family satisfaction and a 92% reduction in student anxiety.
92%. That is incredible.
Yeah.
But, the statistic that fundamentally shifted my perspective is the 89% rate of improved attendance.
Really? Why that one?
Because usually schools treat truancy as a disciplinary issue, right? A kid doesn't show up, they get detention, they get suspended, the parents get a nasty letter. But this data proves that chronic absenteeism is very often a mental health issue. It turns out, if you treat the crippling anxiety, the student can physically show up to class.
Wow.
An 89% improvement. The mental health intervention actually becomes an educational intervention.
It redefines how we view student success entirely. It proves that these deeply painful, murky waters can be navigated.
Yeah.
The underlying mission here is simple. You are not alone, and neither is your child. Applying this framework, learning the behavioral signs, acting as that pressure valve by communicating directly, and utilizing systemic support that removes financial barriers, it really turns an isolating crisis into a manageable path to healing.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Whether you are an educator looking out at a classroom of 30 kids, a parent trying to decipher your teenager's mood swings, or, really just anyone who interacts with young people, you now have a different lens. You know that changes in sleep and mood aren't just phases. They are check engine lights. You know the counterintuitive truth that directly asking about suicide doesn't plant a dangerous seed. It opens a pressure valve and brings profound relief.
Exactly.
And you know that resources like MentalSpace School exist, actively working inside the schools to provide real, measurable therapies. We are not helpless. We have the tools.
We do. And, the mechanism of asking a teenager directly about their pain is so powerful because it destroys the isolation of suffering in silence.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what other taboo struggles in our adult lives, in our own relationships, or our workplaces are we tiptoeing around out of fear?
That is a great question.
Right. Where else might radical, compassionate directness be the exact key to unlocking relief? If we can stop ignoring the fire alarms out of convenience and just find the courage to turn on the light and ask the hard question, we might realize that the most terrifying problems are the ones we finally face together.